So our understanding of ourselves and our world changes over time as we learn more. For example, Pluto existed for millennia and we didn't even know it was there. We couldn't even see it. But in 1930, astronomers in Arizona found Pluto, which is this little dot right here, and called it a planet. In 2015, the New Horizons spacecraft flew by Pluto and took this photo of its surface. Scientists decided Pluto is a dwarf planet, and they now know it's one large mass among many other masses in the Kuiper Belt. Nothing about Pluto changed, and scientists at any point along the way were as right as their current knowledge allowed them to be. But our understanding of, and even our ability to find Pluto, has changed over time. So there are other things we've learned. We have learned that wombs don't wander around inside the body. That was an actual thing that people thought for hundreds and hundreds of years. We all know the Earth orbits the sun rather than the other way around. And we know that sex and gender are far more complicated than we thought. So sex assigned at birth is based on the external genitalia someone observes when a baby is born. Biological sex is the genes a person has, and gender identity is who a person is at their most authentic. Because of genetic differences, sex assigned at birth can be radically wrong. Most of us learned in school that females have XX chromosomes and males have XY chromosomes, and generally that's the case, but biology is so extra. Tremendous variations in genes happen naturally. Some men are XX, some women are XY, and some people have 3 or more sex chromosomes, and some people only have 1. So biological gender is incredibly varied, and some folks don't know of their chromosomal differences until puberty. But then there is gender identity. You can probably see already that labeling people with what we can see on the outside isn't good enough. And it turns out that labeling people with the chromosomes they have on the inside also is not good enough. For one thing, we don't have gender labels for every variation, and we probably don't even know every variation. And the biggest problem with labeling people is labeling people. According to the Human Rights Campaign, gender identity is one's innermost perception of themselves as male, female, a blend of both, or neither. It is how people perceive themselves and what they call themselves. Let me say that again. Gender identity is how people perceive themselves and what they call themselves. People do not need to police the label another person uses for themselves. A person's gender identity can be the same as or different from the sex they were assigned at birth or their biological sex. Gender identity is not a choice. It is an expression of who a person is at their most authentic. And people who seem to us to share the same characteristics might describe their gender identity differently, and that's okay. Most of us grew up in a culture that assumes there are only 2 genders and that people's gender identity should line up with their sex assigned at birth. We know already that biology makes these assumptions false. Newer research tells us that by age 4, most children have a stable sense of their gender identity. But when families and society place gender-based expectations on any person that conflicts with their sense of their truest self, it can lead to mental and emotional distress and trauma. So there are loads of gender identities, and these are just a few. I'm gonna stop sharing for just a second. So I can either go through every single one and define them all, and I'm happy to do that, or I can just send the slide and you can look them up. after the course. Do you have a preference? I don't know if anybody has time constraints.
If no one else cares, Cindy, I just had like one or two. I wouldn't mind
Okay.
picking from that list.
Sure.
If you throw it back up there.
Yeah, so I'll throw it up, and anybody shout out any ones that you're unfamiliar with, and I'm happy to explain them, okay?
So I think intersex, bi-gender, and gender expansive.
Okay. So intersex, it has to do with some of the genetic variations that I mentioned earlier. And it is when the chromosomes or the genitalia are ambiguous regarding whether a person is biologically male or biologically female. Often people have chromosomes or primary sexual characteristics of both. Bigender is identifying with two and only two genders. And which was the other one, gender expansive?
Yes.
Gender expansive is expanding your notions of gender beyond what is perceived as the expected gender norms for a society or context. Does anybody else have ones they'd like me to explain?
Can you talk a little bit more about gender creative?
Yeah, gender creative, this is actually great for Dolly. It is just doing one's own thing, and it is frequently applied to children who explore gender roles and gender expectations to find what feels right to them. Okay. So it's sort of playing with all the options until you find the mix that works for you.
Great, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Okay, does everybody know what cisgender means? So cisgender, this is important, is when gender and sex assigned at birth align in the way society expects. So it's also important to remember that two people might use the same term to label themselves, but understand the term differently. So I can give definitions, but if you go to a different site, if you talk to a different person, they might define it slightly differently, and that's okay. Labels are for a person to help identify how they feel and be able to categorize themselves in a way that feels comfortable. It's not something for us to use to put them in a box.
Cindy?
Yes.
Do these gender identities have sexual orientation built in? So just with that definition of cisgender, it doesn't necessarily indicate sexual orientation.
No, gender identity is completely, that's a super question, Brittany. Okay. It is completely separate from sexual orientation. Okay. It is completely separate from gender presentation or gender expression. It's completely different. So okay. you can, and all of these are all labels that we should give ourselves, but you can be a cisgender woman who's attracted to women or men or transgender or genderqueer people, and you might call yourself pansexual.
Okay.
You could be agender and also be pansexual. Or you could be agender and only attracted to one sex or attracted only to two sexes. So gender identity is just who you are.
Okay.
Is who you're attracted to.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was a great question. Something that I've heard from cisgender people is this: I just can't imagine it. I don't understand. And that's okay. I don't have to be able to imagine it, what it's like to be gender creative or gender fluid if I'm not gender creative or gender fluid. I don't have to be able to imagine it. But I also can't really imagine what skydiving is like because I've never experienced that. But that doesn't mean that the experience of a skydiver is any less real because I can't imagine it. It just means that I have the opportunity to learn what skydiving is like by listening to somebody who has skydived. And though I've shared information with you about gender diversity, the deal is this: only rarely is asking a person's gender identity necessary or appropriate. Are we curious? Of course, because we're human beings, but it's probably not our business. So what we do need to know is that people are all human and worthy of respect and compassion, and that it is important to use the name and pronouns a person uses for themselves. And so if you're not supposed to ask, you know, that's a little hard, but we'll get there. Has anyone here heard of dead naming? Dead naming? Okay. So dead naming is referring to a person by a name other than the name they use now. Okay. So you might have known a person by a different name at some point in their lives, but now they use a different name, and dead naming is referring to them by the name that you knew them by before that is not their name anymore. Has anyone heard of misgendering? Right. So misgendering is referring to a person by pronouns other than the ones they use to describe themselves. Often this is done by accident, and that's one thing. Sometimes it is done on purpose, and that's just not okay. Because if we take a moment, we can understand how dead naming or misgendering, even accidentally, might feel disrespectful or hurtful to someone. So according to Cassie Breiter, an educator and group facilitator with a focus on gender diversity, consent culture, and body positive inclusivity, when someone misgenders or dead names her, her reactions run a gamut, including, "You think you know me better than I know myself." "You'd rather hurt me repeatedly than change the way you speak about me." "My sense of safety is not important to you." "My identity isn't real to you and shouldn't be acknowledged." "You want the people around you to disrespect me." "Offending me is fine if it makes you more comfortable." "You can hear me talking, but you're not really listening." "Me being who I truly am is inconvenient to you." "You'd prefer it if I stopped being honest with you." And "you're not an ally, a friend, or someone I can trust." So if these are typical reactions people have to being dead named or misgendered, then it's important to think about how our behaviors, even unintentional ones, can affect communication with clients, people around us, and even our friends. Acknowledging and respecting gender diversity requires a systemic response. It really needs organization-wide buy-in and consistent policy in organizations in order to be effective. So there are ways that we can, in organizations, that we can prevent ourselves and others from dead naming or misgendering a person unintentionally. A lot of these things are not in place currently, but would be fairly simple to enact. So you could standardize greetings. So when you introduce yourself, you can do like we did at the beginning. "Hi, my name is Cindy Hess. I use she, her pronouns. And you?" And that allows a person to know that it's safe to share their pronouns with you and that you're a safe person for them to be themselves with. You can also create a way to capture a person's name and pronouns in the records that all staff use and educate staff as to where to find that and how to use that information. In everyday life and in organizations, we also can use gender neutral language. So instead of hey guys, you can use words like folks, friends, y'all, partner, and y'all. You can use partner instead of husband or wife or girlfriend or boyfriend. You can use the word shirt instead of the word blouse, and underwear instead of panties or shorts. So cisgender people, that is people who don't need these accommodations because their sex assigned at birth aligns with their gender identity, might not even realize that there are people who do need these accommodations, and they might be confused or offended by these practices. If you're representing an organization, it's an opportunity to educate. You can just say, this is like carding everyone at bars and liquor stores. It's a consistent practice to make sure everyone gets the best service possible. In your personal life, you need to judge your safety. And if it's safe for you to do so, you can explain a little bit if you want to, but again, you need to concentrate on being safe. So in an organization, it's important for people to have accountability and for the organization to take accountability as well. So if they notice clients or staff dead naming or misgendering someone intentionally, it's important to know ahead of time, does the organization have formal standards of behavior that include confidentiality, courtesy, and respect? And if it doesn't, should it have those standards? And if it does, it's really important to make sure that it is applied equitably, no matter who a client is and no matter who the rude person is. Individuals taking responsibility on behalf of the organization taking responsibility on behalf of people who have intentionally harmed someone are critical in reducing the traumatic effects of misgendering and dead naming. So we're going to make mistakes, right? We're all new at this. And we might have known someone and they have come out as a different gender identity than they originally presented as. We're going to make mistakes. I do it. So it's important to know what to do. So if you make a mistake, if you dead name or misgender someone accidentally, just apologize. Be brief but sincere, and don't make excuses. This is not about whether you're a good person. This is not about what's going on in your life. It's not about you. It is about the person. So you're going to apologize briefly and be sincere, and then you're going to get back to treating them like a human being, whether they're a client, whether they're a customer next to you in the store, whether they're a friend. Just get back to treating them as a human. If someone else near you makes a mistake, if it's a colleague, you can let them know quietly. If they don't correct themselves and if the person they misgendered or dead named did not correct them, let them know compassionately. You can model by using the appropriate name or the appropriate pronoun. And remember, it's not about you and it's not about the other person who did the dead naming or misgendering. It is about the person who is potentially harmed. Build trust in your organization, build trust in your friend group so that it is easier for you to help each other learn. This is something that we've intentionally done in Rise Healthy for Life, and it's invaluable. It really is. So, like consent, respectfully interacting with people is just basically good manners. And we all know how to do good manners. So treating people with kindness, respecting them, and believing them when they tell us who they are, even if it makes us uncomfortable, are the keys to successfully and compassionately communicating with any person we might encounter. But this is especially important if we work with anyone who has experienced trauma. And anyone who does not fit nicely into society's categories and stereotypes of sex and gender has experienced trauma. Okay, so that is the long and the short of it, what we can fit into a lunch and learn as well. So the prompts are, today I learned, I never knew, I'd like more information about, or I can be more supportive of gender diverse people by. Okay, today I learned, I never knew, I'd like more information about, or I can be more supportive of gender diverse people by. And then anything else that you want to share about the lunch and learn is fine as well. So I'm going to give you a second, and then just, I would say at this point, just raise your hand if you want to say something. Dolly?
Sorry, I was writing it down. So I can be more supportive of gender diverse population by encouraging my coworkers to change the culture of our workplace to be more open to all gender identities.
Cool. And if you want to holler at us, we have a gender diversity workshop that's more expansive than this. Okay, anybody else? Brittany?
I didn't know there was a term for referring to the person by their pre-transition name, the dead naming. So knowing there's actual term for that, that was interesting. And just the definition of all the different gender identities, how that is a person, their authentic self. So it's only defined by that person. And like you said, not by outside, what outsiders view of that person. And I guess I just had a little question too. I had seen, I thought maybe pronouns ZE, like they, or
yeah, there are a whole bunch.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a, am, they, per. Yeah, there are a whole bunch. And I actually have a list of pronouns. So after the lunch and learns, I find out, if I had a pen, here we go. I find out what people want and I send it. So if you're interested, I would be happy to send you, it's set up to be printed out to print to on a sheet, but I can send you that file and it'll have the information in for the pronouns.
Okay.
So I can send the pronouns sheet. And then do you want a list of the terms that were on that one slide?
Yeah, that would be helpful. Yeah. That'd be helpful.
And then last time people asked for the slides as well. Do you want the slides, people?
I think that would be.
Yeah, okay. Okay. And Molly, do you have anything that you wanted to ask or say?
I didn't know what dead naming or misgendering was until I sat in on this meeting. So
Cool.
And I also didn't know about the list of just examples of like the genders, about the different genders.
The different gender identities?
I didn't know how many like gender identities there were. So that was interesting.
Yeah, and that's not even all of them. That's just what I could fit on a slide.
I didn't know like there was so many. I knew like people had different gender identities, but I didn't know just all of the names of them. So that was interesting.
Cool. And Brittany, I feel like I might have cut you off. I'm sorry. Did you have anything else?
It's okay. I just was thinking about how when you said that if you use the wrong pronoun to just move on and things like, I used to struggle with that until someone gave me an analogy of saying if someone, my husband's name is Charles, but everyone calls him Charlie, and how that's no big deal. And people use nicknames all the time or have a preferred name, and it's pretty much the same thing. You just use what is preferred by that person.
Cool.
I shared earlier.
Okay.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Go ahead, Holly. No, go ahead.
I was saying, I shared earlier about how my oldest, I was working an event, and I always ask people to I encourage people to write their pronouns in their name tags during the events. And so I'm writing my pronouns, and I started writing my child's, there you are, come here, buddy. I started writing my child's name down, and they said, can you use they, them, their pronouns, because I'm not sure if I want to be called he or she yet. And I was like, sure. They said they were bold. They knew that it was a safe place to come to say these are this is the pronouns I want to use, because I was writing pronouns on name tags.
Right. Oh, that's great. The way that you used the pronouns on the name tag demonstrated that you were a safe. Hey, demonstrated that you are a safe. Just the way that us using pronouns in public lets people know that we're safe people to come to. So that's great modeling and wonderful modeling for your kids. Sarah, did you have anything that you wanted to add? No? Okay, does anybody have any other questions or any other things that they want to share, or any information about stuff going on in your organizations that you wanted to share? So in Brittany, as usual, like I said for Dolly, we've got a gender diversity workshop, so.
Yeah, I know, I might be calling on you for that one. We'll have to.
Well, and I'll let you know, Sarah and I are offering it as a real-time online class tonight.
Oh, okay.
So it is available online as well.
Okay, perfect.
So, all right. Well, thank you all for coming. I'm so glad you were here, and this was a great conversation.
It was nice to meet you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Cindy.
All right.
Bye.